A big reason for poverty in the United States is the growing economic inequality in this country. The United States now has the most wealth disparity in the Western world. Here's what's happening. The top 5% of the U.S. now own 72% of the country's wealth. The rest, that is 95%, own less than a third, or 28%. Let's look at income distribution from 1979 to 2007. The poorest 20% saw their wages go up by 18%. Salaries and returns for the middle class grew by 40%. Earnings for people near the top climbed by 65%. But the top 1%, their earnings soared by 275%. So why are we seeing such trends in the United States compared to any other Western democracy? To discuss this, I'm now joined by David Cooper from the Economic Policy Institute. He researches the labor market, poverty, and economic inequality in the United States. Also with us, Dean Clancy from Freedom Works. It's a conservative group dedicated to reducing government spending on health care and other social programs. I want to welcome both of you to the show. Any surprises in those statistics? I'll start with you, Dean.
Well, no. It's simply the fact that in an economy that has been as hurt as ours has been in the last few years, you're going to get this. It's not healthy to have too large an upper class or a lower class. You want a big, robust middle class. If we could get this economy growing again, if we could get the burden of government off of this economy, if we could have a fair tax system so that everyone has a fair chance, then I think you would see not only less inequality, but everyone doing better.
David, he's talking about fairness, but I think if you're in the middle class or you're not in the middle class in a lower rung and you see 275%, it's almost like neon lights. Wow, there's something wrong here. What are your thoughts?
Well, I mean, as you pointed out, this was a change from 1979 to 2007. So this was before the recession happened. We saw this growth. It's a trend that's been going on for a long time. We've had more and more of the country's wealth and income going to a smaller and smaller share of the population. And when that happens, the poor, the poor are just not able to pull themselves up because so little income is going to them. I think a big cause of this has been growth in wage inequality. People at the bottom of the income distribution just haven't seen their wages go up, while people at the top have seen massive growth in wages over the last 30 years. So it's tough for people to pull themselves out of poverty, irrespective of what government is doing, if they're not earning a substantial wage.
Dean, let's pick up on what he's saying here, because this is kind of the conservative notion is It's done through enterprise, pull yourself up by the bootstraps, which kind of seems like a quaint notion when you look at some of these things.
Well, look, you're not going to improve the equality picture by simply trying to take wealth from those at the top end and to redistribute it to others. All you do there is discourage productivity. The pie doesn't grow larger for everyone. The fact is that when you have a growing economy, then people are going to do better. The name of my organization is Freedom Works, and we believe that. Freedom, in fact, works. It's what's made America the best economy in the world. And probably the biggest reason why people at the bottom have not had that wage growth that David referred to, it's because of rising healthcare costs and rising education costs. And what has caused that? Government policies, subsidies, regulations, the tax code, all of those things have fueled an inflation in things that people need, and so people at the bottom of the income scale are the ones being hurt by those government policies.
See, I would disagree. I mean, certainly healthcare costs have risen dramatically, as have education costs. But when we're talking about growth and productivity, this is our capacity to generate income. Productivity has continued to go up steadily, and prior to the 1970s, wages at the median of the distribution tracked productivity very closely. As the economy grew, people got more in wages, sort of across the income distribution. Since the mid-1970s, there was a break in that. Productivity continued to go up, but median wages stayed flat. So people aren't getting the same rewards from the extra work that they're doing. And that has nothing to do with, that's not because of what the government has done. That isn't because of regulation or anything like that. It's simply that employers aren't raising wages because, there's a lack of collective bargaining. There is...
collective bargaining just means that workers can raise the costs of products. Certainly the workers should be able to do that, but they can put businesses out of business, as they recently did with Hostess cupcakes. They put the company out of business by.
Well, but that was after the CAOs, demanded extreme concessions from the workers, and were taking, these huge bonuses for themselves.
Right.
CEO compensation is something like 240 times the average compensation of the average production worker.
Let me pick up where he's going here, because this is a complaint, and you see it in businesses. I mean, what's happening in a lot of businesses in the United States, there are cutbacks. Boy, we've done an economic downturn. You talked about it yourself. So you get rid of employees, and they turn to the employees and they say, you're gonna have to marshal your efforts. You're gonna have to work that much harder. You got to do more work because David's gone now. And yet we see the employee compensation staying down here, but the guys who are running things, cutting all the people, they're getting these bonuses.
Why would CEOs cut the limb off that they are sitting on? The workers
well, that's a good question, but it
produces,
is happening, isn't it?
And it happens because costs are going up. The biggest source of unemployment or people being laid off right now and in the near future is the government takeover of healthcare. A lot of firms are restructuring right now because they know that if they have too many employees...
It's an interesting point that you're making, but when you say cutting off the limb, isn't part of cutting off the limb that it used to be that businesses had that kind of forward thinking, I want to be here in 5 or 10 years, but now you've got the pressures to make the stockholder happy, and so, hey, if I've got to cut, I've got to cut.
But that makes them more efficient. And if the government is larding up compensation through mandates, through minimum wage laws, and all these things that drive up the cost of employment, then in a competitive market, these companies are going to have to lay people off. A more compassionate policy would be to not have all these restrictions on labor market.
I disagree. I don't think, I think that if you were to remove any sort of need for employers to pay a basic wage or to provide benefits like health care, I don't think for a second that CEOs would suddenly want to give all these extra benefits to their employees, that the free market would allow for people to, CEOs and corporate shareholders to necessarily cut into profits so that they can give more to their employees when unemployment is so high and people will take, virtually any job they can get their hands on. The reason we have these government protections is so that when you have periods like the recession that we just experienced, people have some basic protection. They get unemployment insurance, they can find better jobs. They have access to a safety net that will allow them to keep,
I think everybody supports a safety net, but we have had the problem in the 20th century, you see it in the literature, that because of all of the regulations and mandates that we've put on labor markets and on business, the level of unemployment is higher, persistently higher than it would otherwise be. We've basically made a trade-off where we're just going to have more people out of work so that we can have all these alleged protections. We think it would be better to not overdo the safety net so that the economy can be freer and more productive for everybody.
I mean, I disagree. When you look at the period prior to this recession, the normal business cycle after the recession of the early 2000s, that was a period of deregulation, of looser standards on business, and what you saw was the slowest job growth of any business cycle for the last 4 business cycles. So I don't think you can necessarily say that just getting government out of the way is going to lead to job growth. You have to have programs that encourage job growth, that educate people, that generate business, stimulative policies that will get the economy going, but at the same time protect workers' basic rights. I
was at an event recently and speaking to an accountant talking about the fiscal cliff, and this guy works with a lot of big firms here in the Washington, D.C. area, and he said, look, the government can target the people who are making a lot of money. They can go after these higher earners and tax them. He goes, but I'm going to tell you how they think. They're going to figure out some way to keep that money. So if they have a company, they're going to squeeze, and they're going to get rid of the guys who are on the lower rung. So this is kind of a dilemma in a sense, too. Would you agree with that assessment?
Yeah, I mean, there's no free lunch, and the economy is a bit like a balloon. You squeeze on one end, and the air moves to another part of it. People.
So how do we change that?
Well, freedom. If we had the government less involved in healthcare and in education, if we weren't impeding labor markets, you would see more growth and opportunity. All boats would be rising. The pie would be getting bigger, the kind of growth we had in the past before we got into all this overregulation.
I think that over the last 30 years have shown that the market, when left to itself, can do great things, but it can also lead to this huge growth in inequality, this huge aggregation of income and wealth going to a smaller and smaller group. And frankly, the economy would be producing a lot better and be growing a lot more if people on the lower ends of the distribution had more money, when they have more resources, they're more likely to spend that income than someone who's sitting on a giant pile of cash, because they don't have to spend necessarily every dollar that they earn. Whereas someone down at the bottom, they probably need that just to make ends meet. So, I think that policies that encourage a greater equality of incomes and that encourage greater equality of opportunity is good for the economy in the long run.
What kind of policies do you think could be put in place that would help to right this?
Well, I think certainly investing in education is a huge one to help people get out of poverty. I think that strengthening opportunities for collective bargaining. I think that giving people access to protections like unemployment insurance and paid sick days and paid maternity leave, so that they have flexibility in their work schedules and can take jobs that they might not otherwise be able to take. I think things like the minimum wage, strengthening the minimum wage, so that workers aren't receiving poverty level wages. And have income to spend, which will generate more business for businesses.
I wish I had the choice to continue the conversation, but we run out of time. But both of you bring a lot to the table. Thank you so much for stopping by and talking.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.